The Sixth Subject Part 1. The sixth subject. The first thing Professor Julian Harrow said to me was, 5. He did not sound shocked. He sounded disappointed. I had been a homicide detective for 7 years by then, long enough to know the difference between a man hearing the number of people he had killed and a man hearing that someone had counted incorrectly. It was October of 1998, and rain had been falling over Bellwether, Oregon, since before sunrise. By noon, gutters outside the county building were overflowing. By 2, Dr. Harrow was sitting across from me in interview room 3 with his wrists cuffed to a steel ring beneath the table. He was 48, narrow-faced, with gray beginning at his temples and the kind of calm expression that made people either trust him immediately or dislike him on sight. He wore the same brown jacket campus police had arrested him in. They had found him lecturing. That was the part I could not stop thinking about. 5 graduate students had been found dead inside Harrow's house that morning. At 11:15, Julian Harrow had walked into a lecture hall at Bellwether State University and taught cognitive models of perception to 73 undergraduates. He had not run. He had not called a lawyer. He had not asked what the police wanted. He had simply put down his chalk and said, "I wondered how long it would take." My partner, Frank Delaney, stood against the wall behind me. Frank was 56, broad-shouldered, permanently tired, and had spent 28 years developing an allergy to clever suspects. I opened the case folder. 5 students died in your house, Professor. Harrow's eyes moved to the photographs without lowering his head. 5. Naomi Price, Graham Keller, Leah Park, Miles Rowan, Claire Voss. I read each name slowly. Something changed in his expression at the last one. Not grief. Calculation. "Then it's already started," he said. Frank sighed. "What started?" Harrow looked at me. The correction. That was my introduction to the Harrow case. At the time, I thought he was trying to build an insanity defense. 6 months later, I would stand in a police auditorium holding a photograph of a man who had not existed 10 seconds earlier. But that afternoon, all I knew was that 5 people were dead, and Julian Harrow had every reason to be responsible. The call had come at 6:42 that morning. A neighbor saw the front door of Harrow's house standing open. Patrol entered at 6:51. The house sat at the edge of Bellwether, where subdivisions thinned into Douglas fir and wet black roads. It was a 2-story Craftsman with a detached garage and a basement Harrow had converted into a research space. There were no signs of forced entry, no overturned furniture, no broken glass, no obvious struggle. The 5 students were found downstairs. I will not describe their bodies in detail. What mattered was the arrangement. They were not scattered, as if something chaotic had happened. They had been placed around the room with the deliberate spacing of objects in a demonstration. 5 folding chairs formed most of a circle. A 6th chair stood empty. On the floor were tape marks, notebooks, extension cords, a reel-to-reel recorder, 2 slide projectors, mirrors, and sheets of paper covered in geometric sketches. Dr. Lena Ortiz, our medical examiner, met me at the bottom of the basement stairs. She wore gloves, and the look I knew meant she had already found something she disliked. "What?" I asked. "Too early. For cause. For confidence." That was Lena. Most people gave you answers. Lena gave you the percentage of the answer she trusted. Frank came down behind me. "You have 5 dead 20-somethings in a professor's basement. I can give you confidence." Lena ignored him. I looked around. 5 students. 6 chairs. On a side table were 6 ceramic coffee cups. 1 had a lipstick mark. 2 had handwritten initials on masking tape. 3 were plain. I asked the crime scene technician whether Harrow had been hosting them overnight. "Looks that way." "Professor, drink coffee?" The technician shrugged. I did not think about it again until later. The first victim was Naomi Price, 26, doctoral candidate in cognitive neuroscience. Graham Keller, 27, experimental psychology. Leah Park, 25, perception studies. Miles Rowan, 28, philosophy of mind. Claire Voss, 24, first-year graduate assistant. All 5 worked in Harrow's interdisciplinary perception lab. Harrow himself had been at the university since 1986, tenured, published, respected, divorced, no criminal record, no disciplinary history, beyond 2 complaints that he pushed students too hard. His recent work concerned what he called shared perceptual construction. Frank read that phrase twice. What does that mean? I don't know. Good. I was worried I was getting stupid. We found Harrow's car in the driveway. His fingerprints were everywhere, naturally. So were the victims. There were traces tying him to the deaths. There were handwritten notes in his office. There was a tape recorder containing his voice. There was enough, by lunchtime, to make the case feel almost embarrassingly easy. Then campus police found him teaching. He came with them voluntarily, and now he was sitting across from me telling me we had counted wrong. I pushed the photographs toward him. Do you recognize these people? Yes. Say their names. He did. All 5. Did you kill them? Harrow looked at his hands. For the first time, he seemed tired. I remember killing them. Frank moved off the wall. That's a yes. No, I said. Explain the distinction. Harrow lifted his eyes. If I told you that you remember having breakfast this morning, would that prove breakfast occurred? I had breakfast. How do you know? I was there. You remember being there? Frank groaned. Professor, if your plan is to annoy us into dropping 5 murder charges, it's ambitious. Harrow almost smiled. I did not. You said you remember killing them. Yes. How? I remember arranging the experiment. I remember the final session. I remember Naomi asking me whether we should stop. I remember Miles laughing at her. I remember the lights failing. And then I remember things that cannot belong to the same sequence. What things I remember killing them. How? He looked toward the one-way mirror. Different ways. I waited. I remember doing things that the physical evidence says I did. I remember the emotions I should have felt. I remember deciding why I was doing it. And why were you doing it? To show them. Show who? Harrow looked directly at me. The observers. Frank muttered something under his breath. I said, what observers? Something that has difficulty seeing us whole. You mean people? No. Then what? Harrow leaned back as far as the cuffs allowed. Detective Cross, have you ever tried to explain a cube to someone who has only ever experienced a square? I closed the folder. You're going to tell me about dimensions? Eventually. You killed 5 students because of a geometry problem? I told you, I remember killing them. That's a confession. No. It's evidence. Of what? That whatever happened needed me to remember a cause. Frank stepped forward. Interviews done. Harrow's eyes stayed on me. Asked them how many evidence markers were used. I paused. Frank opened the door. Come on! Harrow called after me. Detective I turned. When the number changes, write it down before you ask anyone else. Frank shut the door. In the hallway, he said, do not let Harrow teach you how to think. That sentence mattered later. At the time, I rolled my eyes. I know. No, you don't. You're curious. That's the job. Curiosity solves cases. Obsession lets suspects pick the questions. I looked through the narrow window in the interview room door. Harrow sat perfectly still. Frank, he's not acting insane. Neither do most insane people. That's not what I mean. Frank put a hand on my shoulder. Evan, 5 bodies. Physical evidence. A suspect who says he remembers killing them. Start there. So I did. For the next 6 hours, the case behaved like a case. Lena's preliminary examination suggested the deaths had occurred within a relatively narrow window overnight. Toxicology would take time. There were no indications of an outside intruder. Harrow's basement had been locked from inside at some point. Fibers, prints, and trace evidence all supported the group, having been there together. Then Lena called me downstairs. She had spread scene photographs across a light table. Tell me what you see. 5 victims, not them. I scanned the images. Chairs, tape, equipment, evidence markers, yellow plastic numbers placed beside collected items. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7. I stared. Where's 6? Lena looked at me. That's what I was going to ask you. We found a photographer, a county technician named Carl Benson. He came down carrying a half-eaten sandwich. I showed him the print. Where's marker 6? He squinted. Probably outside frame. Next photograph. No 6. We went through the contact sheets. 1 through 5. Then 7, 8, 9. No. 6. Did you skip it? I asked. Carl frowned. I don't skip numbers. You did hear? No. I pointed. What do you call that? He looked genuinely irritated. I call it weird. Do you remember placing 6? He opened his mouth. Stopped. I remember numbering the scene. That's not what I asked. He rubbed his forehead. I don't know. Lena said. Evidence log. Carl fetched it. 1 through 5. 7 onward. No 6. But the numbering had not been corrected. Nobody had crossed anything out. Nobody had written 6 unused. The record simply behaved as though 6 had never been necessary, and 7 naturally followed 5. Harrow's voice came back to me. When the number changes, write it down before you ask anyone else. I took out my notebook. I wrote, scene markers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7. Nitrogen monoxide, 6. Frank saw me. Don't, what? Start playing his game. This is evidence. It's a technician missing a number. Then why doesn't he remember missing it? Because Carl can't remember where he parked half the time. Carl, still in the room, said, I can hear you. Frank ignored him. I kept the note. The next morning, I returned to Harrow's house with Lena. The rain had stopped, leaving everything wet and silver. The basement smelled of dust, old coffee, and chemical cleaner. Most of the bodies had been removed. The 6 chairs remained. I stood inside the taped perimeter. Why 6 chairs? Lena said. 5 students in Harrow. Maybe. I went to the cups. 6. I had read Harrow's intake report during breakfast. No alcohol and no tobacco. Under habits, he had written, caffeine, none. I called the university department secretary. Does Dr. Harrow drink coffee? She laughed. Julian, never. Tea. Hot water sometimes. He says, caffeine makes his hands shake. I hung up. Lena had watched me. 6 cups for 5 coffee drinkers. Could be old. They're all from last night. How do you know? Residue. Condensation rings. One still had liquid when patrol arrived. I counted the chairs again. 6. Then I noticed 7 pieces of white tape on the floor. Not 6. 7. Small crosses forming a larger circle. One cross was partly beneath a bookshelf. Lena. She crouched. That wasn't in the diagram. What diagram? The initial scene sketch. We checked. The official sketch showed 6 tape positions. I pointed at the 7th. Was this added? She touched the edge. No. Dust line says it's been there. I photographed it with my own camera. Then I wrote it down. 7 floor positions. When we returned to the station, my photograph showed 6. I stared at the developed print in the dark room. I had taken it myself. I remembered centering the 7th mark, but the bookshelf in the photograph sat flush against the wall. There was no tape beneath it. I went to my notebook. 7 floor positions. Still there. I underlined it twice. That afternoon, I interviewed Harrow again. He looked worse. He had not slept. I put the scene marker photograph in front of him. Why is there no 6? He did not look down. You wrote it. Answer me. Did you write it before asking anyone? Yes. Good. Why? Because memory is the easiest thing to correct. Correct by whom? He closed his eyes. The word whom may be misleading. Try me. He opened his eyes. Imagine a drawing on a sheet of paper. A little person lives inside it. 2 dimensions. Length and width. No concept of height. I know the analogy. Then don't interrupt. I almost smiled despite myself. Harrow continued. If you press a finger through the paper, what does the little person see? A cross-section. A shape appearing from nowhere. Growing. Shrinking. Vanishing. Fine. Could the person understand the finger? Not fully. Could the finger rearrange things on the paper without traveling through the routes available to the person? You're describing a thought experiment. Yes. Not murder. Now give the drawing memory. I stopped. Harrow leaned forward. Give every figure on the page a brain built to assume that causes precede effects and objects travel continuously through space. Then let the finger change something. Like what? Remove a line. The figures notice. Do they? If they remember it. Exactly. He tapped one finger against the table. What if the physical world says the line was never there? What if every photograph, every measurement, every record agrees with the new page? What does a 3-dimensional brain do with a memory that contradicts all available evidence. I did not answer. It corrects itself, Harrow said. People forget things. People manufacture things. False memories. Necessary memories. He spoke almost gently now. Your brain is not a recording device, detective. It is an explanation engine. It takes incomplete sensory information and builds a world you can survive inside. And you think something can change the world. Then our brains invent memories to match. I think we observed something whose relationship to our reality is as unfair as your relationship to a drawing. I slid a photograph of the 5 students toward him. Why them? His face tightened. We were trying to create an object. What kind? One that cannot exist. That's nonsense. Not physically. Cognitively. He explained that his research group had spent months testing shared visualization. One participant imagined one component of a structure. Another held a second component. Each component was individually possible. Together, they formed a geometry no single participant could mentally stabilize. We distributed the contradiction, he said, across people. Yes. Why? Because no one brain could hold the whole thing. And what did you expect? A measurable, perceptual effect. What did you get? He looked at the mirror. Attention. I waited. Harrow said. At first, we thought the experiment was failing. Then participants began describing details nobody had assigned them. What details? A direction. What direction? Not left. Not right. Not up or down. He searched for the words. A direction that felt like remembering something you hadn't lived. I said nothing. Then we started dreaming about the same room. What room? Not a room. That's the shape our minds gave it. Did you see something there? No. Then what are the observers? An inference. From what? From being observed. I stood. Harrow's voice sharpened. Detective Cross. I stopped at the door. Do not try to picture what I'm describing. I looked back. Why? For the first time, I saw genuine fear in him. Because a model can be an invitation. That evening, I called Isaac Wren. Isaac and I had been roommates for 1 year at the University of Washington before I dropped physics for criminal justice, and he continued toward a doctorate. We had not spoken in 8 months. He was working at the North Coast Institute for Theoretical Studies in California, a place whose brochures showed whiteboards full of equations and people who looked unhappy about reality. He answered on the 4th ring. Cross. Still alive. Debatable. What time is it up there? Almost 9. So you're calling because you need something. I need you to explain. Dimensions without making me hate you. Impossible. I smiled. For 5 minutes, it felt normal. Then I asked, could a higher dimensional system affect a lower dimensional observer without the observer understanding what happened? Silence. Izaki? Why are you asking? Case? What case? I can't give you details. Who told you to ask that? The tone had changed completely. No one, Evan, a professor we're holding, has a theory. What professor? Julian Harrow. Another silence. Longer. Isaac, stop. What? Stop researching it. I sat straighter. You know Harrow? No. Then why I know the class of idea? What class? Self-referential observer models. Higher dimensional cognition. Distributed representation. So it's real science. No. Mostly it's the kind of thing smart people use to make bad philosophy sound mathematical. Then why are you worried? He breathed into the phone. Because some models are dangerous, even when they're wrong. How? You ever hear of an information hazard? Something dangerous to know. Something dangerous to process. I looked at the notes on my desk. Isaac, can thinking about something count as observing it? He did not answer. Isaac. Finally, if Harrow used those words, stop asking questions. Why? Because if his premise is even partly right, thinking about them may already count as observation. Them. I didn't say them. You just did. No. The line went dead. I checked the clock. 9:17 p.m. I wrote down the conversation. At 11:26, my desk phone rang. Cross. Evan. Isaac. You okay? Are you what? You hung up. Silence. Isaac. Why did you call me at 3 in the morning? I looked at the wall clock. You're in California. I know where I am. It's 11:26 here. 8:26 there. What? We talked 2 hours ago. No, we didn't. I felt the first small movement of fear. Isaac, you left a message on my answering machine just now, asking me to call. I didn't. You sound exhausted. I picked up my personal phone and checked the call log. There it was. Isaac Wren. 47 minutes. 9:02 p.m. I have the call in my log. Then your phone's wrong. You warned me to stop researching Harrow. Who is Harrow? My mouth went dry. You asked me who told me to ask about higher dimensional observers. Isaac laughed once. Not because it was funny. Evan, I have no idea what you're talking about. I looked at the handwritten notes. My handwriting. His words. Thinking about them may already count as observation. Isaac, don't hang up. I'm not going anywhere. Do you remember the phrase, distributed representation? Sure. Did you say it to me tonight? No. I looked at my call log again. Still there. Okay. Evan, what case are you working? I'll call you tomorrow. Maybe don't. What? I said, get some sleep. That was not what he had said. We hung up. I stared at the call entry. 47 minutes. I went to the restroom. When I returned, the entry was gone. No deletion record. No empty slot. The previous call was from Frank at 6:14. I checked my notebook. The conversation remained. I wrote, first call disappeared from phone. Isaac does not remember IT. Then I photocopied the page. I put one copy in my desk, one in my coat. The sixth subject, part 2, one in an evidence envelope. Frank found me at midnight. What are you doing? Nothing. You're photocopying. Nothing. I showed him the note. He read it. His expression hardened. Go home, Frank. Now. You don't think this is strange? I think you're letting Harrow colonize your brain. Isaac said things he later didn't remember saying. Or you misunderstood a phone call. For 47 minutes. Go home. I have the first call written down. That proves you wrote something. I hated him for being right. Frank handed the page back. Cases don't owe you a perfect ending. Evan, this isn't an ending. No. It's the part where a smart suspect finds the cop who can't leave a loose thread alone. He left. I stayed. At 12:43, Frank came into interview room 3, carrying 2 coffees. Harrow was asleep and holding, so I had the room to myself. Frank put 1 cup in front of me. Black. Thanks. He sat across from me. His tie was loosened. Rain darkened the shoulders of his coat. Listen to me. I'm listening. Don't let Harrow teach you how to think. I looked at him. You already said that. When? Yesterday. Then I'm consistent. He pushed the coffee closer. Go home. What about you? I have to check Rowan's apartment again. You already went. I'm going now. He stood. Frank. What? Nothing. He left. I drank half the coffee. 10 minutes later, I went downstairs. Frank's Buick pulled into the lot. I watched him park. He got out, carrying an evidence box. His coat was dry. I could not move. He saw me under the awning. You planning to help? Where were you? Rowan's apartment. For how long? 3 hours. You were upstairs. What? 10 minutes ago. Frank stared. I just got here. You brought me coffee. No. I ran upstairs. The cup sat on the interview room table. Black coffee, still warm. Frank followed. His face changed when he saw it. Whose is that? Yours. I didn't bring that. You sat there. I pointed. You told me not to let Harrow teach me how to think. Frank went silent. I pulled security footage. At 12:43, I entered interview room 3, alone. No, Frank. For 17 minutes, the camera showed me sitting by myself. At 12:47, I reached toward the empty side of the table. At 12:48, I appeared to lift something invisible to my mouth. The video had no coffee cup, but the cup was physically in my hand while I watched. Frank stopped calling me obsessive. We woke Captain Marjorie Keene. She watched the tape twice, then looked at the cup. Who had access to this room? Everyone with the floor key. Could Harrow have arranged this? He was in holding. Accomplice. Maybe. Frank said. An accomplice who can alter security footage, but leaves the cup. Keene glared at him. Do you have a better explanation? Nobody did. At 2:10 a.m., Harrow was brought back into the room. He looked at the coffee before I said anything. Frank brought you that. I felt my heart beat in my throat. How do you know? Harrow stared at the cup. I don't. Wrong answer. It's the only honest one. How do you know about Frank? I don't know Frank. You said his name? Harrow's face went pale. I leaned forward. Who told you? No one. Then how? He looked at me with something close to pity. You did. I never mentioned him. Not with words. Frank was behind the glass with Keen. I could feel them watching. Harrow whispered. They're using me to tell you what you already know. I stood so fast, the chair scraped backward. Who are they? Don't ask me to make them smaller. What does that mean? Every description is a shape. Every explanation turns the thing into something your brain can hold. Good. Give me one. No. You've been talking for 2 days. Because I thought it was already too late. And now. Harrow looked at the one-way mirror. Now I think it noticed you. The investigation should have stopped being rational then. It did not. That was the strange thing. Every morning, ordinary police work returned. Witness interviews, search warrants, university records, autopsy reports, families, people crying in kitchens, professors complaining about subpoenas, a prosecutor asking when we would have enough for charges. The horror never replaced the case. It lived inside it. Naomi Price had been the strongest believer in Harrow's project. Her notebooks were dense, precise, and impatient. One page contained a sentence boxed 3 times. We do not perceive reality. We perceive a survivable model of reality. Under it, what happens when the model cannot contain the observation? Graham Keller built much of the basement equipment. Leah Park had become frightened. 3 weeks before the deaths, she emailed Harrow. I don't think all 6 of us understand what you're asking for in the next session. We need unanimous agreement. I read it twice. All 6 of us. I called the university IT administrator. How many graduate students were in Harrow's lab? 5. You're sure? Naomi, Graham, Leah, Miles, Claire? Then who does all 6 of us mean? Harrow. She wrote this to Harrow. A pause. Maybe she counted him anyway. She says later, you need to tell us what happened to the other participant. Silence. Send me the full email chain. When it arrived, that sentence was gone. I called the administrator again. What did you change? Nothing. You sent me a different email. No. I held the printout I had made from the first screen. The sentence was still there. You need to tell us what happened to the other participant. I faxed a copy to myself at home. Then I put the original in my locked drawer. Miles Rowan left a microcassette recorder in his apartment. Most of it contained research notes. On one tape, his voice sounded exhausted. October 9th. I asked Naomi how many of us were in the lab today. She said 6. Then I asked her to name everyone. She named 5 people, and Harrow. I told her that wasn't what I meant. A pause. I keep thinking there are 6 of us, but sometimes I can only remember 5 names. Another pause. If you're listening to this because something happened, count the chairs. The tape ended. I called Frank. He came in, listened, and sat very still. 6 students, I said. Maybe. Not Harrow plus 5. 6 students. Maybe Rowan was confused. Everyone in this case is confused in the same direction. Frank rubbed his face. Don't say that. Why? Because it sounds like Harrow. We checked the university lab. 7 lockers lined one wall. 5 had victim names. 1 had Harrow. 1 had no label. Inside the unlabeled locker, nothing. No dust pattern from books. No fingerprints we could use. No hair. No papers. But the metal shelf was worn. Someone had used it. I asked the department secretary whose locker it was. She counted. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Professor Harrow. That's 6. Yes. There are 7 lockers. She looked. No, there aren't. I turned. There were 6. I felt cold all over. Frank grabbed my arm. Don't. There were 7. Evan. There were 7. I opened my notebook. 7 lockers. 1 unlabeled. The words existed. I showed him. Frank read them, then looked at the wall. 6 lockers. Did you write that today? 10 seconds ago. He did not answer. We went outside. For the first time in 30 years, Frank Delaney smoked a cigarette. He had quit before I joined homicide. I don't like this, he said. Good. That's not what I mean. I know. He looked at me. What if writing it down is making it worse? I laughed. Now, you sound like Harrow. I'm serious. If reality is changing, records are all we have. Unless the records are the thing keeping the old version around. That idea stayed with me. We started making duplicates anyway. Paper copies. Photographs. Audio tapes. Things stored in different buildings. We avoided computers whenever possible. It did not help. Copies changed. Photographs changed. Tapes vanished. Sometimes only my handwritten notes survived. Sometimes Frank remembered something I did not. Once Lena called at 4 in the morning. How many bodies? 5. No. I sat up in bed. What? 4. I was dressed in 3 minutes. At the morgue, 4 drawers were occupied. Naomi? Graham? Leah? Miles? Claire? I asked. Lena shook her head. Who? Claire Voss. No reaction. I ran to the caseboard for victim photographs. No, Claire. I opened my notebook. Claire Voss, 24. Her name was there. I found a Polaroid from the original scene. 5 chairs around the visible portion of the circle. 4 bodies. I remembered Claire's face. Blonde hair. A chipped front tooth. A silver ring on her right thumb. I remembered interviewing her roommate. I remembered the roommate crying into a dish towel. I drove to the address. A man I had never seen answered. Does Claire Voss live here? No. Did she? No. Who are you? I've lived here 6 years. I returned to the station at dawn. Frank was waiting. Claire Voss, I said before he could speak. His face tightened. 24. Graduate assistant. Relief almost dropped me to the floor. You remember. For now. By noon, Claire's body was back. Lena remembered performing the examination. The 5th photograph returned to the board. Nobody else thought anything had happened. I asked Lena about 4 bodies. She stared at me. There were always 5. I showed her my note. She read it. Your handwriting. Yes. You sure you weren't asleep? I stopped trying to convince people. I started asking questions before telling them what I remembered. That became the only reliable test. Harrow understood. When I told him Claire had vanished and returned, he closed his eyes. How long? About 8 hours. That's longer. Longer than what? He did not answer. How many students were in your final experiment? 5. I watched him carefully. Are you sure? Yes. Was there a 6th? No. How many chairs? 6. How many floor positions? 6. How many lockers? 6. How many people were in the basement? He opened his mouth. His eyes moved slightly, as if reading something behind me. 7. I leaned forward. Say that again? I don't know why I said it. 7 people. I don't know. Who was number 7? I don't know. He started shaking. It was the first time I saw him lose control. I don't know. I placed Leah's original email in front of him. The other participant. He stared at the phrase. Tears filled his eyes. Do you remember someone? No. Try. No. Harrow. He pushed the paper away. Don't make me. 5 people are dead. Maybe. I slammed my hand on the table. Don't do that. Detective. You watched one of them stop existing for 8 hours. I froze. I had never told him about Claire. Harrow saw my face. I didn't know that. You just said it. I know. How? I don't know. Then try. His breathing quickened. There's a space. What space? In the group. Who belongs there? I can't see. Name. No. Male or female? No. Age. Stop. What happened during the final session? Harrow looked at me. We finished the object. What object? The impossible one. Describe it. No. Describe it. He stood suddenly, cuffs jerking against the ring. Don't give it a shape. Frank opened the door. Harrow was crying now. You think seeing is passive because your eyes don't touch things. You think thinking is private because thoughts stay inside your skull. We thought the same thing. Frank forced him back into the chair. Harrow stared at me. We gave it somewhere to exist. That night, I dreamed of a room with 5 walls. I woke at 3:11 and knew that sentence was wrong. Rooms could have 5 walls. The problem was that I remembered standing in the center and seeing all 5 walls directly in front of me. I sat in darkness until morning. At work, I found a sketch on my desk. My handwriting, a shape made from 7 intersecting squares. I did not remember drawing it. I tore it up. Then I realized I had looked at it long enough to memorize it. For the next week, the case degraded. Captain Keene signed a warrant, then denied signing it. Her signature remained. Frank remembered having a daughter for one afternoon. He showed me a photograph of a teenage girl named Emily. By dinner, the photograph showed Frank and his wife alone. Frank no longer remembered Emily. I did. I never told him. I was afraid saying her name might bring back a person who had never existed, or erase someone who did. Isaac stopped answering my calls. Then, on a Thursday morning, he called the station. Evan. Yazaki, don't say anything. I closed my office door. Okay. I found your notes. What notes? You mailed me a packet. I didn't. You did. When? 3 weeks ago. The case was only 12 days old. My hand tightened around the receiver. What was in it? Diagrams, Harrow's name. A letter telling me not to call you until October 22nd. I looked at the calendar. October 22nd. What did the letter say? That if I called earlier, we'd have the wrong conversation. I could not breathe. Was it my handwriting? Yes. Postmark. October 24th. 2 days in the future. Neither of us spoke. Finally, Isaac whispered, Evan, I think you're treating time like it's the thing being changed. What else would it be? Causality. I sat down. He continued. Imagine an event. Call it C. You think A caused B, and B caused C. What if something can replace B with D while preserving C? We remember D. Maybe because C still needs an explanation. Then the past changes. Not necessarily. That's the trap. You're assuming the system has a past in the way we do. What does that mean? I don't know. You sound like Harrow. That's why I'm scared. I looked through the glass wall of my office. Frank was talking to Lena. Normal people under fluorescent lights. Isaac Harrow says, we observed something. Don't ask what it looks like. He says that too. Good. Why? Because if the only way it intersects us is through cognition, then constructing a model of it might be equivalent to giving it coordinates. I remembered Harrow screaming, don't give it a shape. Isaac said, I need you to do something. What? Forget this call. Not funny. I'm serious. How? I don't know. Just don't write it down. I looked at my open notebook. I had already written, I saw causality, not time. He heard my silence. You wrote it. Yes. Then maybe that's why I called. The line clicked, dead. 3 minutes later, the phone rang again. Isaac. Hello. Cross. Why is your office calling me? I closed my eyes. You called me. No. Do you know what date it is? October 22nd. Did I mail you anything? No. I looked at my notebook. It's AC, causality, not time. Still there. What is an information hazard? I asked. He paused. Why? Answer. Information that's dangerous to possess or process. Could thinking about a higher dimensional observer give it coordinates? Silence. Then, Evan, who told you that? I hung up. The missing student emerged through absence. A cafeteria receipt from the lab showed 7 lunches. A faculty parking request listed Harrow Research Team -7. Then it changed to 6. A group photograph showed Harrow and 5 students, but everyone stood slightly off-center. Naomi's arm was extended around empty air. Miles' body angled toward someone who was not there. The first time I saw it, I thought the photo had been cropped. The negative showed it had not. There was simply a person-shaped social space in the composition. Not an outline, not a blur, nothing supernatural. Just 6 people behaving as though 7 people were present. That frightened me more than any ghost could have. I interviewed families. Naomi's mother remembered her daughter mentioning the 6 kids in the project, then corrected herself. 5. Sorry. Why did you say 6? I don't know. Miles' brother remembered a Christmas dinner where Miles brought to lab friends. He could name 1. The second existed only as a memory of someone laughing in the kitchen. Leah's former roommate found an old grocery list. NGLMC. 7 letters had once been written. The last had been rubbed away so thoroughly the paper had thinned. Whose initial was that? I asked. She stared. I don't know. Do you remember another student? No. Do you remember erasing this? No. At the bottom of the page, in Leah's handwriting, don't let H complete all 7. I took the paper. By the time I reached the station, it read, don't let H complete all 6. I had photographed it first. The photograph said 7. For 20 minutes. Then it said 6. My notebook still said 7. I began carrying 3 notebooks. One on me, one locked at home, one with Lena. We compared them every morning, without discussing what we expected to find. The differences became a map. Reality, if that was what was happening, corrected records faster than handwritten memories. Digital systems changed fastest. Official typed records next. Photographs after that. Handwriting lasted longest. Human memory varied. Mine lasted best. I hated that. Harrow noticed. You're the anchor, he said. Don't call me that. Why do you remember more than Frank? I don't know. Neither do one. Is it because I'm investigating you? Maybe. Because I'm observing? Maybe. Or because you're manipulating me? Yes. I stared. Yes. That is also possible. It was the first thing he had said that made me trust him more. He smiled sadly. Don't make the mistake of needing me to be innocent for the impossible parts to be real. That sentence changed the investigation. Harrow could be guilty. Harrow could be delusional. Harrow could have manipulated students. And something else could still have happened. I asked Lena to reconstruct the deaths without assuming one killer. 2 days later, she came into my office. 5 people can explain what happened to 4 bodies. I looked up, and the 5th. That's why you're here. She spread diagrams across my desk. Her point was not that the victims killed one another. It was that the sequence of physical actions implied an extra participant at key moments. Someone moved equipment while Harrow was elsewhere. Someone operated a recorder while all 5 known students were accounted for. A set of partial shoe impressions belonged to none of them, and not to Harrow. What size? Approximately 10. Male. Can't tell. Database. Nothing? Why wasn't this in the original report? Lena looked uncomfortable. It was. No. I remember writing it. I pulled the report. No shoe impressions. She stared. I wrote it. I believe you. She sat. That frightened her more than if I had argued. We returned to the original evidence boxes. One contained a clear plastic bag labeled Footwear, Impression Subject 6. Lena and I stared at it. Inside was nothing. No cast, no photograph, just the label. I called Frank. Before I could tell him why, he said, don't say a name. What? I remembered one. My pulse jumped. The student. I think so. Don't say it. I wasn't going to. Write it? No. Why? Because I don't know if remembering is discovery or construction. He had reached the same fear. We met in an empty conference room. Frank looked 10 years older. I know things about this person, he said. What things? Not identity. Details. Like red bicycle. I waited. Allergy to shellfish. A brother in Spokane. Hates jazz. Broke a wrist at 12. Have you met this person? No. The 6th subject part 3. Then how do you know? I don't. I felt sick. Because I knew them too. Not the same details. Mine were different. I remembered a woman. Frank seemed to remember a man. I remembered black hair. He remembered blonde. I remembered someone who drank tea. He remembered coffee. We were not recovering the same erased person. Our brains were building explanations around the same empty space. I said, don't trust any biographical memory. Frank nodded. Only structural evidence. Numbers, positions, effects without causes. We went back to Harrow. I placed 6 cups on the interrogation table. Then 7 evidence photographs. Then the empty subject 6 bag. Then Leah's email. Then Miles' tape. Then a photograph of the lab lockers. Harrow stared. How many students? I asked. 5. Look again. He did. 5. How many people in the final experiment? 6. 5 students plus you. Yes. I put down my notebook. Why did you say 7 before? His face emptied. I did. Yes. I don't remember. There was another student. No, there was. Name. I don't know. Neither do I. Then you don't know. There was another. I pointed at the evidence. Something is missing. Harrow began breathing faster. Stop. 6 coffee cups for 5 students. 7 floor positions. Marker. 6 missing. 7 lockers before they changed. A footprint labeled subject 6. Miles says he could remember 6 students, but only 5 names. Stop. Leah wrote about another. Participant. Stop. There were 6 students. Harrow covered his ears. Professor. No. Look at me. No. How many people were in the basement? He whispered. 7. Who was number 7? I don't know. Try. No. Try. His hands shook against the cuffs. Then his eyes opened. Because there used to be 7. The room went very quiet. I said, what? There used to be 7 of us in that room. Harrow started crying. Not loudly. Tears simply ran down his face. I can't remember the 7th. 6 students plus you. Yes. What happened to them? I don't know. What happened in the experiment? We completed the object. Then, I remember Naomi screaming. Then, I remember the lights going out. Then there are too many memories. Tell me. I remember everyone running. Okay. I remember nobody moving. I said nothing. I remember killing them. His voice broke. I remember them killing each other. I remember waking alone. I remember the 7th person standing in the center of the room. Who? I don't know. What were they doing? Looking in a direction that doesn't exist. The fluorescent light above us flickered. Harrow looked up. I did too. The corner where 2 walls met seemed wrong. Not moving. Not glowing. Nothing cinematic. It simply seemed to contain one more angle than it should. I blinked. Normal. Harrow whispered. Don't. What? Don't try to see it again. I looked at the corner. 4 lines. No. 5. I counted again. 4. My scalp prickled. What did you see? I asked. Harrow's chair scraped backward. Don't give it a shape. I saw an angle. No, you didn't. I did. No. Your brain offered you an angle because you asked it to represent something. What something? Stop. What did it look like during the experiment? Harrow shouted. Stop asking. Frank entered. The lights went out. Only for perhaps 2 seconds. Darkness. A sound like someone taking a breath directly beside my ear. Then light. Frank stood in the doorway. Harrow sat across from me. The table held 6 cups. I stared. There had been no cups except my water. Now 6 ceramic coffee cups stood in a neat row. Frank whispered, Evan. Harrow looked at them. No. 1 cup had a lipstick mark. 2 had initials. 3 were plain. The cups from the basement. I stood. The room seemed too small. Harrow whispered, It's reconstructing. What? The cause. For what? He looked at me. For whatever happens next. Captain Keene ordered the interrogation suspended. Harrow was transferred to a secure medical wing pending evaluation. The prosecutor wanted us to stop chasing impossible theories and finish the murder case. Officially, we did. Unofficially, Frank, Lena, and I kept copies of everything we could. Then the corrections accelerated. Miles Rowan's tape became blank. Leah's email changed permanently to all 5 of us. The subject 6 evidence bag vanished. The 6th coffee cup disappeared from property. The missing evidence marker became an ordinary clerical error everyone remembered discussing. Carl Benson remembered dropping marker 6 into a storm drain. He told the story with vivid detail. I had been standing beside him at the scene. There was no storm drain in Harrow's basement. When I pointed that out, Carl laughed and corrected himself. Outside. I dropped it outside. There was no drain outside either. He became angry. The brain hated gaps. It would rather invent a drain. The district attorney charged Julian Harrow with 5 counts of murder. The defense pursued diminished capacity. The trial began in January. By then, even I could no longer remember the missing student's face. I had stopped trying. That was important. Whenever a detail appeared in my mind, I asked whether evidence supported it. Usually, it did not. I learned to distrust the feeling of recognition. Harrow looked smaller in court. His attorney prevented me from speaking with him. On the 3rd day, he passed me in a courthouse corridor, under guard. He stopped. Detective, The deputy pulled him forward. Harrow resisted just enough to look at me. When they give you an explanation, don't accept it too quickly. Who? He smiled. You won't remember asking that. They took him away. The jury convicted him. 5 murders. The newspapers called it the Bellwether Perception Murders. Experts debated cult psychology, academic abuse, group suggestion, and Harrow's mental health. No article mentioned a 6th student. No article mentioned changing evidence. Isaac told me the higher dimensional conversation had never happened. Lena remembered 5 bodies and 5 bodies only. Captain Keene remembered nothing unusual about the warrant. Frank remembered more than the others, but less each month. One evening in February, we sat in a bar after shift. Emily, I said. He looked at me. Who? I regretted it immediately. No one. He stared. Should I know an Emily? No. Was she part of the case? No. He drank. Good. I never told him that for one afternoon he had had a daughter. Maybe he never had. Maybe I had been given the memory instead. That was the worst possibility. Not that reality changed. That I could not tell the difference between remembering a lost reality and receiving a new false one. 6 months after Harrow's arrest, the department gave me a commendation. I did not want it. Captain Keene insisted. The Harrow case had been high profile. 5 families had answers. A dangerous man was in prison. The mayor wanted photographs. The ceremony was held in the old municipal auditorium. Frank wore a suit he hated. Lena came late and sat near the back. Keene gave a speech about persistence. That word almost made me laugh. Persistence had nearly destroyed me. I stood on stage with Frank, Keene, Deputy Chief Warren, and another detective from Major Crimes. 5 of us. A newspaper photographer raised a Polaroid camera. Closer together. We moved. Flash. For one instant, the white burst filled my vision, and behind it I saw the impossible corner from interview room 3. Not with my eyes. Somewhere else. A direction that felt like remembering something I had not lived. Then it was gone. Applause, handshakes, coffee. Normal life resumed. 20 minutes later, the photographer found me. Detective Cross. He handed me the developed Polaroid. Good shot. I looked. 6 people stood on the stage. I counted again. 6. Me, Frank, Keene, Warren, Detective Salazar, and a man standing immediately to my left. His hand rested on my shoulder. He was in his late 30s. Dark hair, thin face, blue tie. He was smiling at the camera. I looked at the stage. Empty now. I looked back at the photograph. 6. Who is this? I asked. The photographer leaned closer. Which one? I pointed. Him. He shrugged. Thought he was with you. I've never seen him. The instant I said that, a name appeared in my mind. Daniel. I dropped the photograph. Not because I recognized him. Because recognition arrived after the name. Daniel Cross. My brother. Older. By 3 years. I remembered sharing a bedroom with him. I remembered him teaching me to ride a bicycle behind our house in Tacoma. I remembered breaking his nose when I was 14. I remembered his wedding. His wife, Melissa, their dog, a camping trip near Mount Rainier. The phone call when our father died. Daniel standing beside me at the funeral. 20 years of memories entered my head in less time than it took the Polaroid to hit the floor. I grabbed the edge of a table. Frank saw me. Evan. I could not answer. The memories were detailed, sensory, real. Daniel hated mustard. Daniel played bass badly. Daniel had a scar on his chin from falling off a dock at 11. Daniel called every Sunday. Daniel had lent me money after my divorce. I had never been married. That thought stopped everything. I stared at Frank. How many times have I been married? What? Answer. Never. Relief. Then Frank frowned. Unless you're counting that ridiculous Vegas thing. My stomach dropped. What Vegas thing? He laughed, then saw my face. Evan, I've never been married. Right? You just said. I said nothing. I bent and picked up the photograph. Daniel still stood beside me. Frank looked at it. Who's that? I did not answer. He took the Polaroid from my hand. For 3 seconds his expression was blank. Then recognition softened his face. Oh. I stepped away. Frank smiled. That's Daniel. Who's Daniel? The smile disappeared. What do you mean? Who's Daniel? Your brother. I don't have a brother. Frank stared at me as though I had made a terrible joke. Evan, I don't have a brother. You've talked about him for years. No. He came to the Christmas party? No. He helped you move? No. Frank's confidence began infecting me. New memories appeared. Daniel carrying my couch. Daniel arguing with Frank about baseball. Daniel standing in my kitchen. I squeezed my eyes shut. No. Frank grabbed my arm. What's happening? Don't say anything else about him. What? Don't give me details. The phrase came back. Don't give it a shape. I took the photograph. The man in it was no longer smiling. I was sure of that. I had been sure he was smiling before. Now his mouth was neutral. His head seemed angled toward me instead of the camera. Frank. What? Was he looking at the camera? Frank leaned in. I don't know. Don't look. Too late. His face changed. His name isn't Daniel. I looked at him. What? Frank whispered. I don't know why I said Daniel. The auditorium lights hummed. People laughed near the exit. Someone dropped a spoon. Ordinary sounds. My pocket vibrated. I had bought a cell phone 2 months earlier. A bulky gray thing I rarely used. The screen showed an incoming call. Daniel Cross. I stared. Frank saw it. Don't answer. I did not. The phone kept ringing. On the 4th ring, a memory appeared. Daniel giving me the phone. Birthday present. I knew that was false. I had bought it myself at a Bellwether electronics store. I still had the receipt. The phone rang again. Memory. Daniel standing beside me at the counter. False. Another ring. Memory. Daniel recommending the model. False. Another. Daniel paying half. I pulled the battery out. The ringing stopped. Frank looked around. We need to leave. We walked toward the side exit. Captain Keane called after us. Cross. I kept moving. Outside, rain had begun. Of course it had. Bellwether always seemed to rain when reality became uncertain. Frank unlocked his car. I stopped. A man stood across the street, beneath the awning of a closed pharmacy. Blue tie, dark hair. Daniel, or the man from the photograph. He was not looking at us. He was looking slightly to our left, at something I could not see. Frank whispered, Do you see him? Yes. Good. No. Not good. The man lifted one hand, now waving, pointing, toward the police building behind us. I turned. One office window on the 3rd floor was lit. Interview room 3. Impossible. That room faced the other side of the building. I knew the floor plan, but I could see it. Inside the window sat Julian Harrow. He had been in state custody for months. He looked directly at me. His mouth moved. I could not hear him. I knew the words anyway. Don't accept the explanation. I looked back across the street. The man was gone. Frank said, Evan. Yeah. How many people were on the stage? 5. He nodded. Good then. How many should there have been? I looked at the Polaroid. 6. I thought of the basement. 5 bodies. 6 coffee cups. 7 positions. The missing marker. The missing student. Harrow. 7 people in the experiment. 1 removed. 5 dead. 1 survivor. Reality had preserved the result and replaced the cause. Now the same structure was happening again. 5 officers on a stage. A 6th person inserted. A relationship created to explain him. Brother, friend, co-worker, whatever fit. The thing did not enter reality like a monster through a door. It entered as an explanation. That was the shape we had been giving it all along. Not geometry. Causality. I suddenly understood Harrow's terror. Every time we asked, who did this? Every time we demanded a missing name. Every time we forced an effect to have a cause. We built a place for something to stand. I tore the Polaroid in half. Frank shouted, What are you doing? I tore it again. The pieces fell onto wet pavement. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Frank said, Why did you tear up the picture of your brother? I looked at him. He had tears in his eyes. Frank, Daniel's dead. No. He died when you were 19. No. I was at the funeral. You didn't know me when I was 19. Frank stopped. His face went blank. Then horrified. I remember it. I know. I remember your mother. My mother died before we met. I know. He pressed both hands to his head. Jesus. I grabbed his shoulders. Don't explain it. What? Whatever memory comes next, don't explain it. How? I don't know. He laughed once, almost sobbing. Great plan. The auditorium door opened behind us. Captain Keene stepped outside. You two, okay? Neither of us answered. She saw the torn photograph. What happened? Nothing, I said. She bent and picked up one piece. The section containing the unknown man. Keene stared. Recognition crossed her face. Daniel. I snatched it from her. Don't. She recoiled. What the hell? Do you know him? Of course. How? She opened her mouth. No answer came. I watched her brain search for a cause. I saw it happening. Her eyes moved. Her expression changed. A memory was being built. I said loudly, don't answer. She stared. What? Do not tell me how you know him. The thought remained unfinished. Her face slowly cleared. She looked at the paper. Who is that? Frank and I exchanged a glance. For the first time, we had interrupted a correction. Maybe that was another explanation. I put the photograph pieces in my pocket. We drove to the station. Interview room 3 was dark, empty. No Harrow, of course. I sat at my desk. There was an envelope waiting, no stamp, no handwriting. Inside was a photocopy of one page from my notebook, a page I did not remember writing. At the top, the sixth subject is not a person. Below, the sixth subject is the explanation. My hands shook. Frank read over my shoulder. What does that mean? I thought of Harrow's experiment. 6 students, 1 professor, 7 minds, completing an impossible object. But maybe we had misunderstood the numbering from the beginning. Maybe subject 6 was never simply the erased student. Maybe the label referred to a role. An empty, causal position. A place the mind had to fill. The missing student had occupied it once. Daniel occupied it now. Or, Daniel was what my mind called it. I turned the page. One final sentence. If you can remember who wrote this, it is too late. I could not. The handwriting was mine. Frank asked, did you write it? I don't know. That was the correct answer. For once, I let it remain correct. I did not investigate the envelope. I did not dust it. I did not check cameras. I did not ask who delivered it. Every instinct I had as a detective screamed at me to find the cause. I refused. That may be why I am still here. Or that may be the explanation I have been given. I resigned from homicide 3 months later. Frank retired the following year. Lena moved to Arizona. Captain Keene never mentioned Daniel again. Julian Harrow died in prison in 2004. Official cause was cardiac arrest. I received no message, no mysterious package, no final confession. Life, disappointingly, continued. For years, I avoided theoretical physics. I avoided articles about Harrow. I threw away notebooks. I stopped counting chairs when I entered rooms. I stopped checking photographs for extra people. Most importantly, when I remembered something strange, I let it be strange. I did not force it to make sense. That is harder than it sounds. Human beings hate unfinished patterns. We see faces in clouds, meaning in coincidence, motives in tragedy. We would rather accept a terrible explanation than no explanation at all. I think that is what Harrow discovered, and I think that is what noticed him. Last week, 28 years after the Bellwether case, I received a photograph in the mail. No return address. It was an old Polaroid. The commendation ceremony. I almost burned it without looking. Almost. 5 people stood on the stage. Only 5. Me, Frank, Keene, Warren, Salazar. No, Daniel. I felt relief. Then I noticed the audience. In the first row sat Naomi Price. Beside her, Graham Keller, Leah Park, Miles Rowan, Claire Voss. All 5 students, alive, watching the stage. There was an empty chair beside Claire. On the back of that chair was a paper sign. Subject 6. I turned the photograph over. One sentence had been written on the back. My handwriting. You keep thinking the missing person is the subject. I stared at it too long. A memory began. Someone sitting in that empty chair. A face. A name almost forming. A life waiting behind it. I stopped myself. I put the photograph face down. I did not ask who had been sitting there. I did not ask who mailed it. I did not ask why the dead students were alive. I did not ask whether Julian Harrow had ever existed. I did not ask whether I had really been a detective. Those are all questions. Questions demand answers. Answers demand causes. And somewhere, in a direction I still cannot picture, something is waiting for us to need one badly enough. So if you remember someone nobody else does, do not prove they existed. If a photograph contains an extra face, do not ask for the name. If a story has 5 victims but 6 cups, do not count them again. And if you ever find yourself staring at an empty place where you are certain someone should be, resist the oldest instinct in your mind. Do not fill it. Because Professor Harrow was wrong about one thing. We did not give them somewhere to exist. We gave them something much more useful. A reason. END.